Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green, and this is God in America. Thanks for being with us today. Last month in June, I attended the Oklahoma Second Amendment meeting in Yukon, Oklahoma. Jake Merrick was there and gave a campaign speech for his newly declared gubernatorial race. Jake was a former state senator in Oklahoma. I interviewed him very early when I started my podcasting, and I've recorded his message for us and hope that you enjoy it and you get some good information. Well, thanks again for being with us. I hope you enjoy this presentation.
Thank you guys for having me out. I got a nice bright crowd on this rainy day. And happy Father's Day, of course, to all the fathers here and such. I'll be talking about that aspect as well because I believe families have truly been under attack, and it's my intention to reprioritize fathers in the home and the restoration of families. And so I'll be talking about, I think I'm doing the same thing, grabbing the bottom there. But so good to be here. My name is Jake Merrick. I did serve as Senator of District 22. Just to catch you up on a few things, if you weren't aware, I won that in a special election. Stephanie Bice went to D.C., vacated her state Senate seat. I ran for that state Senate seat in a special election, won that in a miraculous way. I mean, God just, when he has a plan, he makes sure that it goes according to his plan. And that's our great confidence. And got to serve and learn and see, as they say, how the sausage is made. Sometimes there's some nasty sausage being made, but got to learn a little bit about that. And then leaving that post, God opened a door for me to have a radio show. So I've been speaking on the airwaves for 2.5 years on Point 9. It's been a beautiful time. It's also been a sharpening time. And my favorite part is being able to interview experts in different fields. And so for 2.5 years, I've had the opportunity of having experts in different fields, a variety of fields, legislators, the governor, variety of guests, to focus mainly on Oklahoma, because that's been our heart. That's been my primary call, is Oklahoma. I'll talk about that in a little bit more, about why this particular seat at this particular time. But get to speak about what's happening here in the state. And I love it. And been doing that for 2.5 years. That will be coming to an end, unfortunately. So that's some new news I'm letting people know. I'll talk a little bit about my campaign and why we're running it the way we're running it. It's very different. I believe that today is the day for radical change. I think Trump has really paved the way and set a precedent and opened our eyes to what is possible. He's been truly a wrecking ball up in D.C., and he's truly worked on draining the swamp. I know we haven't agreed with everything he's done, but it's been refreshing for us to see someone come in who isn't catering to the swamp. I mean, hasn't it? It's been refreshing. And I don't know about you, but it's refreshed some hope that it is not all lost. And where does that hope come from? It comes from someone who's willing to take some bullets, to take some shots, to go up there and say, this is what's right, this is what needs to be done. Of course, he's not bought out, right? He's independently wealthy, so it gives him an advantage. He can go up there. He's not catering to lobbyists and those who have groomed him and, funded him to get in there. One thing I've learned in running 3 races so far, now diving into my 4th, is that the root of corruption begins in the campaign. And so if we want true systemic change, we have to do things differently. Of course, the definition of insanity, right, is to keep on doing the same things, expecting different results. That's what we keep doing with our campaigns. And we keep on wondering why we see good men and women and they get up there and they change. Well, they didn't change when they got up there. They changed in the campaign and you didn't know it. And so what I saw pretty quickly is the influence of the consultant. You have a well-intentioned, based person who says, I want to run for the right things. I want to go up there and make a difference. I have no clue, though, about, maybe they've spent their life in business. Maybe they've been a homemaker. Or maybe they've just been a farmer and rancher. And they're like, but you know what? I got to make a difference. And usually that comes from some kind of assault on them. The taxes have become unbearable. The red tape unbearable. Their children have been taken away. Whatever it may be, there's been some kind of assault. There's been no ears listening to them. So they say, well, I better step up and make a difference. I'm gonna change things. Where do I get started? And what I found is as soon as you say, I'm going to jump in and run, you're swarmed with consultants saying, hey, I'll help you. And I hate to, just like we don't want to say all law enforcement is bad, all teachers are bad, all doctors are, no, there's bad actors. There are some good consultants, but based on principle, a consultant comes in And they're not doing it for free. I found that there are some good consultants, but the ones that I would say are good, they don't charge. This is a business. It's a business, and they want you to win. And they'll tell you they want you to win because they want to change things. But they really want to pad their portfolio and have a record of all of the victories so they can sell the next candidate, so they can stay in business and grow their business. So essentially, they want to win at all cost, and usually at your cost. And they tell the candidates, don't worry about it. We're going to host fundraisers for you. Well, what happens at the fundraisers? So they recruit lobbyists. They recruit corporate interests to come in and donate all this money. And the consultant says, see, I got you taken care of. What happens though is if and when they win, now they owe. They got to pay this tab. And all of these corporate interests and lobbyists now, they say, hey, remember we helped you get in here? Well, I'd like you to run this bill. And this is the pattern. And the threat is, and I received this threat, is, we helped you get in. We would hate to have to, support the opponent. We helped you get in. We can help someone else get in. And, essentially, if you don't do it our way, we'll make sure that you don't stay. And that's exactly what happens. I was told that by a very conservative think tank, surprisingly, here in Oklahoma. One that I was surprised to see this come from them. But they're very influential, and they have an agenda, and they're very well funded. And I was not in favor of the school voucher bill. I voted against it. It was a very controversial bill, and they lobbied me hard because I was the holdout. I wasn't sure really where I stood on this. And they knew it was going to be a tight vote, and I probably would be the deciding vote. And we sat down and we talked through it. And, my concern was these private schools are going to receive government money. Flag number one. Now we have to make sure that public money is spent appropriately, right? I agree with that. Accountability, transparency. So we're going to have to audit a portion of those to make sure. Just take a sample group. We're going to audit those to make sure. In the bill, it was written down as 10%. 10% of those private schools that took the voucher, they would be audited to make sure that parents aren't getting the voucher and go buying a boat, or something like that. Well, I said it's 10% this year, but I saw the pattern. Next year, they bring it back and they say, we had a little bit of concern there with that audit. So we're gonna audit a few more. We're gonna bump it up to 20%. And I knew the way this would go too. They would bring it back and say, this is just cleanup language. We're gonna add an amendment. We're just gonna have ultimate transparency and accountability for those that are receiving public money. So we want to now have 20%, just 20% of private schools audited. I could already hear it. And then as time goes on, well, we're going to go ahead and audit all of them that are receiving public money. And it's just the camel's nose under the tent, as they say. And suddenly these private schools, these private institutions become public institutions, doing the bidding of the state, organizing their schools based on state standards, having the curriculum approved by the state. And I said, no, I can see where this is going. I cannot. But I didn't come to that conclusion very quickly. I wrestled with it because there were good arguments for it. The argument was this is a free market solution to hold public schools accountable. We want to address the corruption in public schools. So we need to give them options to go elsewhere if they don't agree with what's happening in the public schools. Touted as school choice. One of my big red flags is when Jeb Bush came to town promoting this. What's he doing here? So I wrestled with this because I truly wanted to see a correction in our public schools. We still need that. But I didn't think this was the fix. And I think instead it was going to create more problems. In the group that was talking to me, they said, well, eternal vigilance. We have to just constantly fight. We have to be aware but why create problems that are unnecessary? And so in the end, during that notable Senate session, the bill was presented, and on the floor, I was still wrestling with this. I was still wrestling, yes or no. And I was still being lobbied pretty hard. And as I sat there and considered this, I reflected on Davy Crockett and the story surrounding him with "It is not yours to give." And I won't tell all of the details of that, but essentially the story goes that in Congress they were looking to pass appropriations for a widow of a veteran. He had died in battle. Beware of emotional manipulation, because it happens all the time in government. This poor widow, her husband died in battle, serving this great country. Shouldn't we help protect her? See how that happens? Already your heart is being pulled. And Crockett's heart was pulled as well, until he remembered wisdom that was given to him by an old farmer who said, this is not your money to give. Who are you to decide what you do with my money that the government has taken? And so Davy Crockett, he decided to vote against this measure, and he said, this is not mine to give. It's not ours to give. And that became this classic thing. You should read the book if you haven't, a little short pamphlet. But I remembered that on the floor. And I said, this is not ours to give. And I voted no. Actually, I voted yes. Well, I voted no. And then I talked to a senator in the back, and one that I respect, and he said, it's a safe vote. I know you have questions, but it's a safe vote. Title is stricken. The title had been pulled off the bill, which means it can't be finalized until that title is restored. So it can't go to the governor's desk and be signed into law unless that title is restored. Now, the little game is we'll pull the title off. It'll be a safe vote. And then we'll take it back here behind the mysterious curtain. We'll make the necessary adjustments, restore the title, and then bring it to the governor's desk. So I voted no on it. That was my initial impulse. I don't feel good about this. There's pressure. There's people talking. During the 2 hours, the vote is being held up, by the way. We saw this happen just recently at the end of this session where a vote being held. Who holds a vote open? Only the elite, only the leaders, only select people. So I'm sitting here, I'm hearing this. I'm like, after about 5 minutes or so, I'm like, what's going on? And then I realized they're waiting on the right number of votes. The pro tem is carrying this bill. He's holding the vote open so he can go and work the floor and get the right number of votes. That needs to change. So he's working the floor. He never came to me. He knew first that I came in as a man of principle, that I'm going to vote on principle, and you're not going to be able to persuade me with deals and offers and things like that. I made that very clear coming in. So he was sending other people, and I talked to this one senator. He said, it's a safe vote, title's off. So I considered that, and I was like, okay. There's a lot of pressure on here because in the public, it's been presented as school choice. This is a Republican bill. And so the general public was all for it, to the point that after I had eventually voted no, I went back to Oak Pack that I had been many, many times. And a lady was there, a big supporter of mine. She came up, stuck her finger in my face, and how dare you? You betrayed us. I said, whoa, what's going on? And she would not relent. I said, can we talk about this? No, you are a scoundrel. I'm like, wow. They had been thoroughly convinced that this was a Republican conservative bill. And if you voted against it, you're voting against God himself. So, but I voted yes. And then, voted no, talked to the senator, titles off, safe vote. Okay. I vote no, or vote yes. Immediately had a pit in my stomach. I'm like, I'm walking around talking to some of the others. And I have to tell you, I went up to another conservative senator that I consider a friend. And I'm having a discussion with him. We're talking about it. And he's really against this bill too. He doesn't like it. But he said, if I vote no on this, I'll have an opponent. And I'm kind of like, so? And so we talk and everything. He sits down. He gets a little gumption, gets a little backbone, and he votes no. He gets a text almost immediately. His face goes white. He said, I just drew an opponent. That's how quickly it happened. They were watching it. They're watching it. Who's for us? And immediately they send a text. You're out. He changes it back to yes. And I said, so I consider this. I went up to the pro tem. This is a safe vote. And I said, will I see this vote again? Will I see this bill again? If I vote yes for this in its current form and it changes, will I see the vote again, this bill again? And he said, I can't guarantee that. And I said, my vote's a no. And he said, no, please, no. I said, nope. Before he could argue with me, because I don't care what your argument is. If you're going to take it behind closed doors, switch things up and bring it to the governor, that's shady. That's unethical. Should not happen. I don't care what kind of bill that is. I'm voting no on it. And I don't care if I have an opponent. So I went back to my desk and hit the red button. Said, see you guys. They're like, where are you going? I said, I'm out. That's my decision. I'm not going to hang around for people to try to convince me otherwise. And I left. And then on the way out, I found the guy that had been lobbying me, who'd been working with the pro tem. And I said, holding this vote open for 2 hours, that's wrong. This is wrong. And I left. And so this is the kind of stuff for me that highlighted the shams that are going on up in the Capitol. And it takes people who are willing to sacrifice their reelection, who are willing to give up their position, who are not going to vote based on how they're going to be reelected. There's a saying up at the Capitol that if you're explaining, you're losing. That means on a hard vote, go with the flow. On a hard vote, just vote with the party. Because if you don't, you're going to have to explain that to the public and they're not going to listen. The mailers are going to be sent out. The money's going to be raised against you. And the general public is going to see he voted against all the other Republicans. He voted with the Democrats. That's going to be on the mailer. Now, if you can raise another $5,000 to $10,000 and send out your own mailer to reply, see, that's why I've been saying, please throw the mailers in the trash. They are absolutely worthless. You cannot trust them. You can't trust most things that are out there. But that's the way the game is played. And so that's the way the game was played with me. And they were able to do just that. Raise the money and raise up an opponent and get me out. So I was praying over the Capitol after that. And I was just like speaking to the corruption. I was like, Lord, move in that place. Change the hearts. And he said, the problem is not there. The problem is out here. There's a saying that politics is downstream from culture. That what we see currently in the Capitol is just the inevitable result of who we are as a people, who we've become. I want to see a day where it's impossible for a corrupt politician to get elected. Wouldn't that be exciting? That is my heart. That is my mission. When I talk about radical change, I'm not talking about radical change up there. I'm talking about radical change out here so that it will flow into the Capitol. And good men and women, we elect them to go represent us. That's why my campaign agenda for this race is a family first agenda. Let me explain. I'm very into health. I believe in taking care of your body. I have a Health Kick Thursday on my show, on my radio show. And I say that the first step in protecting your freedom is protecting your health. And I really believe that. I believe in the Second Amendment, obviously. But you also need to be able to move without getting out of breath, you know? And it'd be helpful if you weren't dependent on Big Pharma and the long list of medications. And it'd be helpful if we actually ate real food that our bodies were designed to digest rather than artificial food in boxes and containers. Now I'm speaking to myself. I'm not perfect in this way. I know we eat based on convenience a lot. And the food industry is smart and they have designed food to truly be addictive. If you just read some books on that, there's lots of material on that. But here's the thing. We have become a very unhealthy, physically unhealthy culture. And I believe we have to reclaim that. A big part of my push here for governor is to see a massive health campaign across the state of Oklahoma. We are at the bottom, like 49th in the nation when it comes to obesity and heart disease, cancer, these kinds of things. And guess what? All of these things are easily changed. I was a personal trainer for years. I owned a couple of gyms, helped many, many people get off medications, lose weight. One lady I worked with to avoid back surgery. She had back surgery scheduled in a month. I said, well, let's just work on this and see if you can avoid it. After a month, she was strong and she said, my pain is gone. I'm not having surgery. Praise God. So these things can be changed, and they are changed at your kitchen table. They're changed in your own house. It's not the government. Don't wait on the government to do something. We actually can take action today. Start making choices today to change your whole life. And this is a big part. If we want small government, limited government, we must have self-regulation and self-government. John Adams, he said that our Constitution was written only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the governance of any other. That our Constitution only works where men and women fear God, where there's a moral and religious people. And he said, actually, the Constitution does not work where that is not present. Why? Because men and women must fear God, and that is what creates self-accountability, self-discipline, self-governance. I'm not doing it because I will go to jail if I do it. I'm doing it because I fear God. I want to do what's right in His eyes. And then we create legislation and policy to reflect His character. He made it really clear, really easy. What is right and wrong? It says in the Bible that when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. Well, those that are intent on righteous legislation, laws of the land that reflect the laws of God, that's where righteousness rules, and that's where people rejoice. And guess what? Where righteousness rules in the land, we can have maximum freedom because people will self-regulate. I say you don't want to give a monkey a gun. You know, if we are in a room and there's a chimpanzee right here and he's jumping all over the place, you know, and we say, hey, here's a 9mm. Let's see what he does with that. Would any of you duck? I think so. Someone who is not regulated, who's just gonna, you know, you don't give a child a gun, right? We need someone who is self-regulated, self-disciplined, who knows how to use it. And then when that's the case, let's give everybody a gun. Maximum freedom, where there's self-regulation. But when we live in a society where there's unregulated people, we have to say, that's why we're seeing the growth of government. When it comes to things like child welfare, this is not the government's job. This is not the government's job to take care of children, but the church is not doing it, so the government has to step in, and they're doing a horrible job. Guess what? Anything the government does, compare that to the free market, and it will be far less superior. It will be inferior. And that's where if it's one thing, if you're talking about roads, which we need to fix too, but when we're talking about children and families, we have to have a cultural shift. We have to have a revival in the land where the people actually step up and step into their place. I was at a fundraiser, spoke at this fundraiser the other day, and a lady came up to me and she said, I need help. I'm trying to go to the legislature on an issue and I can't get anybody to listen to me. Her issue was she lives in a food desert out in western Oklahoma. The small town she lives in, the last grocery store had closed down. The only place that they can buy groceries is the Dollar General. She said, you can't buy fruits and vegetables here. We have to drive 30, 40 miles to the nearest grocery store to buy groceries. And we're on a fixed income and we can't do that. So she was going to the legislature to appeal to them for some kind of assistance. And I said, listen, you don't want the government feeding you. That's a bad place to be. But where's the church? It was interesting because the next week after that, I went to a church out in Tampa, Florida, and saw something that rocked my world. We visited a campus, and this gentleman, Rodney Howard Brown is his name. He was the first pastor to get arrested during COVID because he refused to stop meeting. They arrested him. He said, you'll never do that again. So he built an airplane hangar, had open air meetings. And from that point, they've actually met every single day from that point. I think they're at like 1,674 meetings that they've met consistently since that day. And he said, you'll never take away my food. So he took 5 acres of his 90-acre campus, refurbished it, made it into, they call Eden. And I tell you, it will blow your mind. There's just acres of food, big greenhouses, hundreds of banana trees and blackberry trees and squash. And I mean, like every kind of vegetable. And it's like Eden. Like you're just walking there saying, I can't believe this. And the reason is because he's going to feed his people. And I'm like, and I was thinking about the lady out in Western Oklahoma who can't buy fruits and vegetables. Do we need that? People are asking me as governor, if you're to be elected, how would you solve this problem and this problem and this problem? And my response to most of those is, well, I'm going to encourage the people to do it themselves. And for a lot of people, they recoil like, well, what are you going to do then? As little as possible. I had an hour and a half on Facebook Live last night, an hour and 49 minutes on X last night, answering questions, talking to people. I enjoy it. It's great. I'm going to do it again this Tuesday. So if you're on Facebook, I'm going to do a Facebook Live. At 6 o'clock, 7:30, I'm going to do this X Live. Answered a ton of questions, lots of questions coming out. What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? My answer over and over again was, well, I would like to see the county address that. I would like to see the cities address that. That's actually not government at all. That's a family issue right there. And so over and over again, the solution is local. The solution is local. And if we can solve it locally, we don't need to grow government, and if we don't grow government, we don't have to take more money. You want the government to do it? They will gladly do it. And they'll charge you for it with your taxes. We're in this big push for tax reform while we're growing government, while we're paying the United Arab Emirates to come in and install an aluminum plant in our state. We're paying them to do that. And we're going to talk about tax reform. We have this gradual phase out of income tax, not going to happen. I'm going to just prophesy because they're intent on growing government every year. We got to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. I mean, we see the model now with Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the Doge effort. I love what Representative J.J. Humphrey's saying. He said, well, I call it the Oklahoma Dodge, not the Doge. We find out where the corruption is and we just kind of turn around. We are one of the most regulated states in the union. Over 142,000 regulations on the books. Over 80 different agencies that are receiving appropriations. Yeah, we need to reduce that. These agencies are created to do something that the people should be doing, that the churches should be doing. And so we can complain about the agencies, but at the same time, we have to also take action. And I believe the action has to start at home. I think we have to reinstill the nuclear family with a father, with a mother, not a father and a father, or a mother and a mother, but a father and a mother together in the home, engaged and involved and active in the children's lives. There's ways that we can incentivize and encourage that. But one thing that I would do as governor is stand in front of the pulpits and in front of the platforms and just say this over and over and over again. We've got to restore the families, the nuclear families. I have an agenda that is centered on families first. I started talking about health and I got way off. I believe in health. How do you know if you're truly healthy? You do blood work. It's not based on the scale. It's not based on your appearance. You do blood work and you find out at the cellular level what's going on. That's where you find out if you have cancer. That's where you find out how robust your immune system is. If you're deficient in any vitamins or minerals, you have to take blood, check your hormone levels. And at the cellular level, you have to look at how healthy are my cells. That is the indicator of how healthy you are. The same is true in the state. I believe the family is the cell of the state. That we have to take a look at the family. The families are in disarray. There is massive dysfunction in families, in the core unit. We've got to restore the families. I don't care what it looks like on the outside. At the core unit, it's broken. It's corrupted. It's cancerous. So we've got to restore that. I don't want to spend 4 years as governor trimming the trees. It looks better. Doesn't it look better? When down below, it's eat up with cancer. I'm actually interested in reality and truth and saying if we really want to fix this, we got to go to the core. We got to go to the families. I want to incentivize families to stay together. Incentivize fathers and mothers to stay together. I want to incentivize to make adoption more affordable. We adopted out of DHS. My daughter's 16 years old. I went into DHS when she was 3, when we started to foster her. And When I left DHS, I told my wife, I hate this place. It is full of brokenness. It's full of misery, appealing to corrupt judges and courts. They get to decide what happens to their families. So broken. And so we've been praying over families of Oklahoma for 12 years. People ask me, why are you running for this seat? Why not run against Lonnie Paxton out in Grady County where you live? Why not run against Tom Cole? Both of them need to be replaced. So why not run against them? It doesn't excite me. I want systemic change. I want statewide revolution. I've carried the state of Oklahoma in my heart. 77 counties. We've been praying over 77 counties and the families of those counties for over 12 years. It's not about a glory in the position. It's about where do I need to be to effect change the most in Oklahoma. I don't want to go to DC. I want to stay right here and I want to see this state reshaped and changed. What we're going to do is go around the states into communities. People are like, how are you going to do this without millions of dollars? Well, watch. We're going to go into communities. I'm not depending on meetings like this. Love you guys. So thankful for you. But every one of you voting for me today will not get me into office. We have to go to the general public. The people that are disenfranchised, who are only going to show up that one day to vote, who have no clue about the political process. They're going to vote on whose sign they see the most of on the way to the voting booth. That's who we have to reach. I have a whole host of notes. I never use notes. I don't know why I write them down. But I believe what I'm saying here is what needs to be said. I can give you a lot of political stump speeches, things like that. What I'm saying is what I believe is actual reality, that what will affect true change. And I believe we'll set Oklahoma up as a model for the nation. I was on staff at a church in Tulsa. We were having a 5-day revival. The man I just told you about that had the big, beautiful garden, Eden, he came to town. He does crusades all around the world. He's from South Africa. He's a big game hunter. You go to his office and he's got an elephant and a zebra and a rhino and just one of those pastors, you know. They have signs outside the door says, we carry here in the church, beware. If you try to do something here, you will leave in a body bag. There's signs that say that. So he's that kind of pastor. You'd love him. He came preaching at the church and we were meeting in the Spirit Bank Event Center in Tulsa. And it seats about 5,000-6,000 people. We were a smaller congregation, about 300-400. And we were renting out the main court on Sundays. All of the surrounding stadium seating was empty. When he came to town, a lot of the churches came and we bloomed to about 1,000 people in there. We were pretty pumped about it. 1,000 people, you know. Some of them got up into the stadium seating and we had a staff meeting and he came and spoke to the staff and he said, so why is this place not full? I'm like, well, it's kind of a big building. And he said, I could fill this place up overnight. Why isn't it full? One thing I think we all need to learn is don't be quickly offended when you're challenged. This is something I've worked on making that part of my life is when someone challenges me or calls me out, don't be offended. We have so many fractures in the Republican Party right now because people are so easily offended. Stop getting offended. Let's get along. We got to get together as Republicans. He challenged us and said, I can fill this up overnight. Why is this not full? Fourth night of the revival, he's preaching and he says, he stops. He has long services, like 5-hour services. I know. But amazing things happen there too. And he says, would y'all like to fill this building up? I'm telling you, faith was in the room and everybody said, yes. So he said, hold on. So he calls his team up. They get together and he says, he's consulting with them. He says, okay, y'all want to fill this building up? Everybody, yes. All right. Service is over. It's dismissed tonight. Here's my team. They're going to tell you what to do. So they start telling people, okay, if you want to do this, if you want to help with the bus ministry right here, if you want to help with giving out things right here. And they started lining people up. People started just lining up and like everybody's breaking up. It was just like wild. People started donating groceries, donating laptops, school supplies. A couple of people donated cars. His philosophy was, I don't care how to get them here. I'm going to get them here. I'm a fisher of man. I'm going to use all kind of bait and I'm going to get them in here and I'm going to preach the gospel to them. So that's what he did. Printed out 10,000 flyers. The next morning, we got up and handed them out all over Tulsa. That evening, there were lines out the door. Every seat was full. 300 people got saved. And I was just like, all of the staff at our church is just like, wow. And what I learned is it just takes a will to do it. So I've started asking that about me. And during this campaign, how do we reach the masses out here? How do we go beyond the GOP groups, the OK2A groups? Well, I believe God has a strategy. And I think we can use our creativity and we can appeal to the needs of the people, and we can bring them in. That's what we're going to do. My first stop is going to be Chickasha, Oklahoma. This is just where God has been leading us. We're going to go to Chickasha. I'm working with the pastors out there to organize this community event and do the same thing. I'm wanting to see thousands of people come out from the community. And when they come out, I'm going to tell them about Jesus. And I'm going to say, do you like taxes? Well, if you don't like taxes, you need a smaller government. But to have a smaller government, you have to have self-discipline. You have to start doing what you need to do so government doesn't have to do it and then charge you for it. And I think that makes sense across party lines. And it makes sense to people who are not politically engaged. It's like, wow, I don't like paying taxes. Maybe I'll get involved. And so we want to point them to Jesus, plug them into churches, and tell those churches, disciple these people. And then what I want to see is the local drug addict get saved, get discipled. Next year when I come there, he's running for city council. So how do we raise up the right people to do things different up there in the Capitol? Like that. I mean, who's recruited for these positions? They're usually top tier influencers in our community. But who are often the most passionate people? The people who have known the grace of God, who have been radically saved and changed, who say, you know what? I am not bought out by anybody. If God can save me, he can do anything through me. I don't need a consultant. I don't need lobbyist money. I'm going to run for office and do what's right. And then they get elected. They go up there and they'll continue doing that. This is my vision for how we change things. It's a bottom-up vision. It's not appealing to them. Please, please change. They will not. And the next round of people we send up there will not. Unless we send them up there truly, I'm going to say it, saved, filled with the Holy Spirit, understanding the grace and the law of God. We were birthed as a Christian nation. And I'm not saying that I would stand as governor and say everyone needs to be Christian. I was asked that last night. How do you handle all the different kinds of faiths? Freedom. I want to give freedom to everyone. Worship as you wish. That's First Amendment, right? So I don't care. I'm so confident in my God and I'm so confident in the power of the gospel. I want freedom for everyone. And then we want to see the church active out there. And I'm not worried about the Muslims taking over. I know they want to, but my God's bigger. I just believe he is. And so I think that we got to get active on that way, on the most fundamental way. I'm going to promote families first. Here, the last few minutes, I'll give you my campaign speech. I want to restore, protect, and move Oklahoma families forward. If you see, it's RPM. I know Gerald would like that. RPM, going to restore the family, the nuclear family. We're going to protect their right, the family's right, to lead their children in education, in medical freedom. I mean, we want parents leading that. And we want to move them forward by removing the barriers like taxes and red tape, bureaucratic agencies, things like that. All of those I can flesh out more, but that's the gist of it. I really want to come and speak on the heart of the issue so you can understand why. I don't want to give you the whole campaign platform and you'll even say, oh, that was a cool thing, RPM, that was creative. But you need to know why. So I'm spending a lot of time talking to you about the why and where this comes from. I'm not taking any lobbyists or special interest or PAC money. There are great ones out there like OK2A. I'm not taking any money from OK2A. I'm not taking any money from OKHPR, from good organizations. I'm taking only donations from individuals. And I've said before, I'm not going to take money from individuals, but I've had so many people reaching out saying, I want to give. How can I help? And I'm like, I had a Sunday school class in Tulsa, some people I used to go to church with. She called me and said, hey, we just raised $100 for you. Where can we send it? I'm like, well, actually, I haven't filed yet. I haven't formed a campaign yet, opened a bank account yet. So there's no place you can send it. But I want to honor that. And for people who really want to give, I'm going to receive that. And we're going to be very clear where that money's going. I will be filing at the end of this month because I want you to know, you who have been investing in me and getting behind this vision, I want you to know I'm all in. And so I'm going to be filing at the end of the month. The bittersweet thing for me is I have to lose my radio show. So when I become a legally qualified candidate, they don't want the risk of being sued for equal time from other candidates. So they're going to end the show June 20th. The other side of that is I have some alternatives. I'm not going to stay off the air. I'll be on podcasts. I have the Jake for the State podcast that I'm really ramping up. I'm working on a deal on a really cool van that's going to be a mobile broadcasting unit that we're going to use to go all over the state and broadcast around the state. Pretty cool. I also have a neat show I'm going to be rolling out called, you're going to like it, We're Drilling Down on the Issues. It's a panel show of me and 4 experts in different fields. And when I say experts, I also include parents in that. Please consider yourself an expert in your field. And I'll have, like, for instance, if we talk about education, I'll have a parent, a school board member, a superintendent, and a teacher. And we're going to talk about issues related to education. And we're going to drill down and find solutions. So I'm calling it Drill Baby Drill. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So I've got those 2 things I'm rolling out probably next month as we end the radio show. And we're going to be going across the state speaking on the things I've spoken to you about, on these root issues and how I believe we truly change the culture, change the capital at the root level. I highlight it all the time. Somebody asked me, what is the most pressing need in Oklahoma today? The House and the Senate leadership. It's upside down. We have the House Speaker appointing the chairman of the committees. We have the pro tem appointing the chairman of the committees. So all of those chairmen are accountable to him. So if he doesn't like what's going on, he will tell those chairmen, do not hear his bills. They're the gatekeepers. I believe that needs to shift, and those chairmen need to be elected by the body. That's a bottom up. That currently we do not have a Republican form of government in Oklahoma. That's scary. What does it need? It needs a rule change, a simple rule change. The pro tem of the Senate needs to approve rules that would say he's giving up power. That's the hard part. Same on the House. So somebody has to be elected who is willing to give up power. Benjamin West went to paint a portrait of King George III. He's an American painter, renowned. He was painting a portrait of King George III. He's painting. King George says, what do you think is going to happen with George Washington after the Revolution? I hear he may go back to his farm. Benjamin West said, yes, that's what I've heard. I've heard that he will return back to his farm and go back to civilian life. And King George says, if he does that, he would be the greatest man in the world. Well, he did that. We need people who are not in it for power, not in it for position, who are willing to lay it down. My agenda here is to return power back to the people, the true government of the land. You are the government of the land. We decide who goes up to represent us. And there's a lot of work to be done, but it has to start with us. We have to get our act together. This is my message as I go across the state. So, it may not be a real flashy, catchy campaign platform. I don't care. What we have to do is wrestle with these truths. It is kind of flashy though. RPM. I like that. RPM. It is flashy. Restore the nuclear family. Protect them from government overreach and move families forward by removing the barriers like taxes and red tape. I would like to see, if I had a magic wand, a consumption tax, a fair tax. I believe it's the most fair way. So we remove the state income tax, the corporate tax, and the property tax. And it all moves to the register. It all moves to a consumption tax. That tax goes up, but you're not paying all the other taxes. So you have more money to spend. And it's voluntary. You get to decide when you pay taxes. It's not taken from you. And the rich pay more because they buy more things. The poor pay less because they buy less things. Seems like the most fair approach. So if I had a magic wand, that's what I would push for in the state of Oklahoma. Until then, I want to push for removing the property tax. I mean, all of us want it. All of us want it because we actually want to own our property, not pay rent to the government. But it requires a constitutional change. So we have to fight for that. It requires the legislature, but I will fight for that. I will push the legislature to make this constitutional change so we can truly own our property. Man, when we do that, here's the thing. When we do that, we start letting people keep their money. We stop stealing from them. There's efforts to reduce the property tax, and I'm not for it because you move it. I'll vote for it if it comes by my desk because it's a move in the right direction. But guess what? What we're saying when we do that is we're just going to steal less of your money. I don't like it. Okay, I'll take it, but I'm coming after all of it. So this is how you have true school choice. This is how you have true school choice, is letting people keep their money and then they decide where they want to send their kids. Okay, it starts with taxation. Let's go to the fundamental. So these are some fundamental things I'm going to be working on, starting with the family. How do we protect and encourage the family unit? How do we keep parents in control of their kids' education, in charge of their kids' health? Do you know that there was a bill passed? I think it was passed. Do you know about the 13-year-old with medical privacy? Where a 13-year-old could sign a form and say that they do not want their parents having any say in their medical procedures. Did that pass this year? I don't know. But the fact that it was even brought up, even got through a committee. So yeah, we want to make sure that never happens. And so these are the things that I'm going to fight for at the core unit, cellular level of the state. And so I know that I could go on all day. I actually have a dance recital I have to get to. I do want to, if y'all have time, I don't want to, if y'all want to ask any questions, yeah.
That they have.
Right.
More government
That's true.
regulations.
That's true.
To keep them, whereas if we could get back to a point in time where we could self-govern ourselves, family government's one of the core types of government.
Yep, exactly.
And that would solve so many problems.
Yeah.
So,
Let me tell you, part of our campaign strategy I'm excited about is we're actually going to do soul winning. Soul winning. So we are actually going to go tell people about Jesus. And this is not Christian nationalism, okay? So I know there's this big push and because this is the leftist talking point, right? No, we're just going to point them to their creator who gave them rights, let them understand where true freedom comes from. And then we're going to have policy that reflects limited government. So there's a company out in Florida that we met the owner. They do home automation systems, and they go to door, knock on the door, and they sell these home automation systems. They also lead people to Jesus. And they have an app they created called Soul Tracker, and they record how many people they led to Jesus. And this year so far, they led 6,500 people to Jesus, selling home automation systems. They say, we may not sell them a system, but we're going to tell them about the gospel, the good news. And they do that, and then what they do is they plug them into local churches to be discipled, so they don't just leave town. It's beautiful. And I loved it. And I said, I want to use that in the campaign. We're going to go canvas neighborhoods. We're going to invite them out to these events, fun events with entertainment and giveaways and everything. But we're also going to tell them about Jesus. If we miss this part, we're missing everything. Alexis de Tocqueville, and they went all over America exploring it. His conclusion was the reason these people are free is because of the fire preached in the pulpit. Can you believe that? It was because of what was preached in the pulpit that motivated people to fear God. And because they feared God, they were a moral and religious people. Therefore, the laws could maximize their freedom. So we've got to get back to that. And we can't be ashamed of that. So we're not going to be. So love what you said. Yeah, great quote by Benjamin Franklin. Yes, sir. No, I'll say after.
And we need tendencies, but there's a lot of things in our Constitution.
Oh, yeah.
We need
Yeah.
to take office and actively do this, because you're exactly right. We got to start at the grassroots
Right.
level and have revival. And then
That's good. That's so true. So true. You know, what you guys are doing with the buttons and the signs is beautiful. And I think it represents what my heart is in this, is saying, you don't have to ask me for permission to campaign for me, right? And so go out and do it. Go out and make signs and buttons and hand them out. How beautiful is that? Rather than me working on raising millions of dollars so I can make buttons and signs and then give them back to you, I feel like that just kind of reinforces a mentality that we're seeing with taxes. You know, that, okay, we're going to ask permission for freedom to move, and they're going to say, yes, we approve. We'll give you a tax credit. So we need to shift that mentality of like, no, we're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to go ahead and do it at the grassroots level. So to your point about the Constitution, we saw Medicaid expansion in the Constitution. They changed the Constitution for that, right? And so it can be changed. It can be changed. There is a system in place to change the Constitution. Well, it involves both. It involves both. If we had a resolution to end property tax started by the people, an initiative petition with the appropriate number of signatures, how would any of the Republican legislators vote against that and survive? I mean, I think we bring that to them. I think we need to lead that petition to end property tax in Oklahoma. Now, the big question is, well, how are we going to pay for schools? Well, we can't lead with that question. We have to do what's right. What's right is stop stealing from people. Let's do what's right, and then we'll figure out how to fund schools with the money we actually have, not the money that we need, so we're going to take it from the people. So that's where I stand on it. Do what's right first, and then everything else will fall into line. So I think we can change the Constitution. About the Convention of States, I know there's a lot of back and forth about that. I would be for it. I think that it's going to be very hard to do it. I understand. I think so. Yeah. I mean, there's a big push for it. Maybe it's more likely now than ever. So yeah, I mean, I think that it would be good as long as it's clearly defined exactly what we're going to address at the convention. So you don't get there and you have that runaway convention that everybody fears, and all of a sudden we're changing the very Constitution, you know? Right. It's true. It's true. So I think that I think it would be good. And I think it would be a huge statement, and it would probably help set things right. But I love this conversation around state sovereignty and would love to have that more. Someone says they don't support me. Well, here's a key thing is I love to sit at the table with anyone. And I don't care if you're not a Christian, if you're a Democrat, you know, if you have they, them pronouns, you know, I will sit at the table with you. I will sit at the table. We'll have a conversation. And I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to do that. I was out door knocking during one of my campaigns, left a flyer, nobody answered. So I walked down the street, made the circle, was walking back the other neighborhood, and I saw this lady coming. She had signature blue hair. She was walking her dog with her rainbow collar. I said, oh, I know who she is. And she was she was marching aggressively towards me. And I noticed she had something in her hand. And when she got close, it was my flyer. And she said, did you leave this at my door? Yeah, that's my flyer. Yes, I did. My name is Jake. I don't care what your name is. You know, your policy on homosexual, LGBTQ is destructive. We have people that are ending their lives, and you don't care. And she just went on and on. I said, listen, I do care. I said, I would love to talk more about this. She said, I work with children every day who are gender fluid, they're confused, and your policies are just going to hurt them. And I said, listen, is there a chance that I could meet them? Kind of took her back. And she said, I would never let them meet you. I said, well, how are we going to work this out? How are we going to find out where we stand and, you know, have a conversation about this? I'm willing to. Are you? She threw her flyer down and walked off. So that's my approach. That's my approach to answer the question is let's have a conversation. You know, I've said this before. I said it last night. Ron Walters, I consider him a friend, and I like a lot of things that he's been doing. I just think a lot of the way he's been doing it may not be the most productive. And so I think we have to get sexually explicit material out of our schools and out of our libraries. You know, I'm in favor of the Bible in schools. I wasn't at first because I didn't know what that meant. Are we going to have teachers teaching theology? I don't want them teaching my daughter. Even within Christian denominations, Baptist and, charismatic, there's differences. Catholic, Pentecostals, all these. And so it's like, who are they? Who's going to be teaching? What are they going to be teaching? I have concerns. And then the rules came out, and it's very clear it would not be teaching theology or religious preferences or doctrine. It would be teaching the historical connection with the founding fathers, the influence of the Bible on their lives and on the founding documents. And I said, well, I'm for that then. So I said, why didn't he release the rules first? That would have avoided a lot of chaos. But I think that maybe he wanted the chaos. Chaos breeds publicity. And so, I get it. It's a strategy, but it's not my strategy. I like to promote peace. I like to sit with people and have the conversation. And so, as we talk about those with differences, I'm not trying to be a tyrant. My main goal is freedom. My main goal is to protect God-given rights, to have a limited government. And in order to have that, I just know we have to have a stronger culture and stronger families. But I love the conversation, though, with anybody. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I see. That's what I'd love to see. Just like we're seeing with the buttons, just like we're seeing with the signs. We plant the seed and people say, just didn't think about doing that. And so I would love to do that. Go out there and plant seeds and say, well, let's think about how to solve this problem locally without growing government, without raising taxes. And then plant the seed, and then however we can help facilitate that without growing government or raising taxes. So I love that. Absolutely. Fostering and adopting is hard. It's very hard. We've experienced it. We're still going through struggles with it today. And so we need more than just individuals stepping up. We need communities stepping up. And I'm not saying I align with Hillary Clinton, it takes a village, right? But I'm saying that the church itself is a community that I believe is perfect for this. It was designed for the orphan and the widow. And so we need to see more of it. Any other questions? Yes, right. Yeah, I know, and so another just like strategy that comes from the Capitol is to pass the bill out of committee with no intention of ever hearing it on the floor, but they can vote for it and then put that on a mailer to say, hey, at least I tried. But they already know it's not going to the floor. And so we saw a lot of that kind of posturing this year with regulation around green energy, where lots of bills were proposed, none of them survived, and we were left here with no regulation. So what I see right now with the green energy agenda in the state of Oklahoma is it's similar to marijuana coming into Oklahoma, where it was introduced without regulation. And we have solar farms with no defined setbacks, same with wind turbines. So the property owners that are neighbors are not protected, and there's no clarity anywhere. And evidently they didn't pass anything this year. So that has to be done. We have to define these. We have to define the property right issue. There's lots of environmental concerns with solar panels. Of course, the gearbox is leaking oil. All of the petroleum used to create the wind turbines and then transport them and install them, it doesn't seem very green to me. Lots of questions still around solar panels and the impact on the environment there. And then, of course, the loss of farm and ranch land in the process. And so we got a lot of questions there. If I was elected governor today, I would declare a moratorium on all green energy projects day one. We're going to hit a pause. Now let's answer the questions. Let's get regulations in place. That's what had to happen with marijuana to get anything done. They declared a moratorium on it until we got regulations in place. That's what I would do. I'm not saying we're going to just end it. We might if it doesn't seem viable and it's actually dangerous or damaging to Oklahomans, but we need to hit pause. So I would do a moratorium on all these projects. Carbon capture seems like the most ludicrous thing. We're going to vacuum carbon out of the air and pump it underground. And we're not producing anything, not creating anything, but we're only requiring more taxpayer money to fund it and doing something trees do. So I don't understand it. And also creating a great risk if those pipelines rupture. So that needs to stop. And it's all just driven by the climate change activists who believe the world's going to end tomorrow. So I would do a moratorium on this to end that, to hit pause, answer the questions, get the regulations in place, and then we can talk about what the next steps are. Humanure. Let me just address that real quickly. If you don't know, it's the spreading of human waste on farmland for fertilizer. Now, waste is gross, right? So whether it's human or animal, it's going to be gross. That's not the issue. The issue is the toxins and the chemicals in the waste that are being flushed down toilets, poured down industrial drains, all collected in the same place, and they're still in there when the waste is spread over the farms. I mean, lots of concerns, the narcotics, the fentanyl, the birth control, All of this that's flushed down the toilet, spread across our farms, that'll be absorbed by the wheat, eaten by the cattle, and passed on to us in all kinds of ways. Going down to the water supply, blown in the air. Very dangerous, very toxic. It's destroying our farmland. We have examples like Maine, where they have land that is completely unusable for the next 100 years because of this. So we're losing farmland in an effort to get cheap fertilizer. We have to end that. We have to end that. And so, and on top of that, speaking of the environment, because there's concerns about chemtrails and whatever else may be happening in the sky. You know, I realize that some say, oh, that's conspiracy theory. Here's the thing. I'm not saying it's true or not, but I want to remove the possibility of any kind of poison being released over Oklahoma skies. You know, let's just go ahead and make it clear. No one is going to be allowed to release any kind of poison over Oklahoma skies. I wanted to, when I first came into office, make sure Oklahoma skies were protected from what Bill Gates was working on, of releasing the particles that would reflect the sun. So his effort was then to, you know, cool the environment and the earth. So he wanted to release particles that would reflect the sun out of the atmosphere. I said, no, not over Oklahoma. Of course, none of my bills got heard. I was shut down, so that didn't happen. But I do believe it's important to protect the skies, to protect the soil, and to protect the water. And in doing that, we'll also help improve our overall health in Oklahoma. You had a question over here? Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, you're exactly right, because you have these gatekeepers. And the committee is one of those, but then the floor leader is the next one. And it might soar through committee, but then the floor leader decides if it's heard on the floor. So again, you're leaving that up to one person. Yeah, so I like that idea. But again, that it would be up to internally within the House to change the rules. So that means we have to get the right people elected, which means we have to go back to the culture, change the culture to send somebody up there to go do it. And it's happening. We got really good people elected. There's a movement in both the House and the Senate in the right direction. We just have to keep our foot on the throttle. In the back. Yeah, absolutely. Now, my big question with those is how many of those proposals came from the people and how many of those came from lobbyists? Now, if we're having 300 laws a year coming from the people and these are real legitimate concerns and these laws are intended to protect their constitutional right, which I believe is the function of government, then if that's the number, that's the number. But I think it's overinflated because we're having a lot of unnecessary legislation to protect lobbyists, special interest groups, energy companies, potential foreign actors. Like, those are issues. We got to shut those down. And I think if we shut those down, we could eliminate a lot of laws. And yes, I believe that we do need to clean up our statutes. There's a lot of contradictions in our statutes, and some repealer laws would be nice. And also, I think we need to make sure that districts are represented, meaning that every representative and every senator gets a certain number of bills heard. And so we need to, again, these are things I want that I would be vocal about and push for, but then it would have to happen internally within the Senate and the House within their own rules, which goes back to our culture, electing the right people to send up there to get that changed. You know,
to be sure that people are
exactly
at the state level and when it comes to governing, because they don't know the Constitution.
100%. Yeah, exactly.
So that's President Garfield represents us to understand how constitutional law works. So maybe make it a requirement that if I'm
there you go. That's what I was thinking. Patriot Academy. Yeah.
Biblical citizenship classes.
Yeah.
Available.
Awesome. Yeah.
Then
good. Right on. Yeah, I interviewed a pastor that was running for the Senate last year, and I know him, consider him a friend, great pastor. But when he started talking about his position going into the Senate, it was all about compromise. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I'm interviewing him thinking, what are you saying? And he wanted to reach across the aisle. He wanted to compromise. And I'm like, this is not what I hear from the pulpit, you know? So you're right on that just because they're a Christian or even pastor does not make them a good legislator. And they need to be educated. Not to say we can't sit down and talk, have these discussions across the aisle and everything, but compromise is kind of a curse word to me. You know, I think we, at this point, have to hold fast and stand and say, this is the truth. And I'm willing to talk with you about it. I'm not going to force it down your throat, but truth is truth, you know? Yes, ma'am. Executive Order Day 1 to say no Sharia law in Oklahoma. Absolutely. That is not shutting down a religion. That is shutting down a type of government that would usurp the government of Oklahoma. Yeah, she said it didn't pass. Yeah. So again, you know, executive orders only go so far, but I appreciated Governor Stitt's executive order concerning DEI in our universities that then resulted in legislation that dealt with that as well. So an executive order can help pave the way for it. And I would definitely be in favor of that because it is a real threat to democracy. That sounded like a leftist. To the republic. Yeah, I caught myself say, sometimes you watch too much news and like it just comes out. Like, not democracy. What am I saying? But yeah. No, thank you for that question. That's good. And I've heard of, I can't confirm, but I've heard of pockets here in Oklahoma that are pushing for Sharia law. You know, There was concern, of course, with St. Isidore, with public money going to St. Isidore. And then A.G. Drummond, his message was this is going to open it up for Muslim schools to also receive public money. So, I think there's something to consider there. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. And I was on the side of St. Isidore on that case, and I know that can open up a whole can of worms there. We can have that conversation, but I think that it truly was discrimination based on religion, and I'm not afraid, like I said, of other religions also in the state. I believe that we serve the one true King, and that he is more powerful, more victorious, and so, should public money go then to all? Well, we have a major issue with the education crisis here. And priority number one, how are we going to have schools that offer top tier education with real results? And, I'll just hit on that real quickly with education. My approach for that, my starting point for that is with administrative bloat, looking at our superintendents. We have over 17 superintendents in the state making over $250,000, and we have a handful of those making over $400,000. So that's a lot of money going to one position, and then not including their staff, of course. And so we had a piece of legislation this year that was saying we would require at least 50% of appropriated money going to the classroom. And it failed. What? I would think at least 50% of the money would go to the kids and the teachers and the students, right? Well, they thought otherwise. I just think that there was a big lobby with a voice there on that one. So, yeah. So I want to start there, looking at how we don't need more money. We just need to use the money more wisely and, deal with these NGOs that were contracted by the schools to do things. And obviously with Tulsa, the big scam there that showed tremendous waste of resources. So a look there with NGOs and just how the money is being appropriated. We need statewide audits in our public school system. But then also, secondly, I want to empower teachers in their own classrooms. As we are working over here on restoring the nuclear family and getting families in order, we also have to say there's a lot of dysfunction currently in the classroom and makes sometimes teaching impossible. Teachers need to be able to handle unruly kids and send them home without administrative blowback. And so I want to make sure we empower teachers to handle their own classrooms. Yes. I wonder if we could take the profits of fentanyl and use it for education. It would probably pass. We could have an illegal gun run, use the profits for education, as long as it's for the children. So, yeah. Yeah. And where is that money from the casinos? And where is the money from the lottery? Is it truly going there? That's what the green energy is pushing as well, right? But we're going to fund education. Are you? I don't think you are. So, yeah, I think that first we start there to say how much of that money is actually going. That's why it was passed. I'm not a fan of starting the lottery so it can pay for education or allowing more gambling. These are the corrosive things that are actually tearing families apart. But it's okay if it funds education. So, yeah, I think we need to take another look at that. Of course, that ties into the issue with the tribes. Are y'all good? We can stay here all afternoon? No, I'm playing. I have a recital I'm supposed to get to. So let me just open the can of worms with the tribes. Obviously, a complicated issue. I talked about sitting at the table. We have to sit at the table because we're bound by federal treaty. That's what makes it all complicated. Things would be very different, obviously, if we didn't have that federal treaty with the tribes. And on this issue, please, I am very open to suggestions. I don't claim to have the answers here, but I know it starts with sitting down at the table and having a conversation. This was brought up by someone else at another GOP meeting where I spoke, and I thought it was a legitimate point. We can't go up to Canada and vote, right? So why are they in a self-declared sovereign nation able to vote within that nation and also in Oklahoma? I think that's a good point. If you want to be separate in your own sovereign nation, you can vote in that nation, handle your own things, but you will not be able to vote in Oklahoma elections. That's a good point, huh? So I think that could shift things and change things up just by the nature of what it means to be a sovereign nation. So that's something I'm still mulling over in my head too, thinking on that. Yeah.
On the same line.
Yeah, exactly. It's not right. It will inevitably become parasitic. And if because they're wanting to grow and expand, how do you grow and expand within another state? There's a huge conflict there. I'm interested in hearing from the tribes what their vision is, and to sit with them and say, what is your intention here? Because I think there are limits that we will not let you go past this line. And we have to set those lines in place. And I think it's entirely possible. I don't know what Stitt's approach is with the tribes. It looks like he negotiates from afar, which I don't think has helped. I think you have to get in the same room with them and have these conversations while also being firm and saying, this is the line that we will not let you cross. And we will navigate the waters as we need to because of the federal issue, but we're going to exercise our rights as a state. I mean, I'd love to talk more with you and whoever else about state sovereignty. Obviously, is priority for me. State powers, the influence of the 14th Amendment and things like that. Really big issue, but state powers and state rights, state sovereignty is very important. And when I was voting, when we were dealing with the issue of abortion in the state, Supreme Court said Roe versus Wade. That's my argument. I mean, what I was saying is, okay, well, the Supreme Court, think about if Kamala were to be elected. Thank you, Lord. But this scenario, if Kamala Harris had been elected, I could see something like this unfolding of talking about hate speech. We're talking about removing books out of the school library, right, that are sexually explicit. And what is the left pushback? The Bible. Well, what about the Bible? There's violence in there. There's sex in there. Guess we got to get the Bible out. And I could entirely see at some point them saying, we're going to make the Bible, it's hate speech. It's full of hate speech. It's discriminatory. And we're going to remove the Bible. Bibles are no longer going to be printed in the U.S., And then, next step is we're going to confiscate Bibles. It's just fueling animosity. It's fueling discrimination. It is really the source of all evil in this country. So Bibles are illegal in the U.S. So what do? Well, the Supreme Court said, gather your Bibles. Guys, we got to go. No. You got to submit to government. So get your Bibles. Let's go. But that's what we were doing with abortion. The Supreme Court said, no, we're going to kill the babies. Get your babies. Let's go kill them. And so at some point you have to draw a line. I went up to Edmond Public Schools because a grandmother called me when I was in the Senate and said, my granddaughter will not go to the bathroom because boys are being allowed in this girl's bathroom. I'm like, surely. This is an overprotective grandma. So I went up and I met with the superintendent. And I said, listen, got a grandma who's concerned. I know it's probably not happening, but she said her granddaughter won't go to the bathroom because boys are being allowed in the bathroom. And I know it's probably not. And she said, oh, it is. No, we have to for federal funding. That's what I told her. I said, there are some things that are not worth the money, namely protecting our daughters. I could not believe that it was happening and that she readily admitted to it. And so, yeah, they were fighting for that, for the money. All about the money. So, which prompted me then to write I believe was the first piece of legislation in Oklahoma that would forbid boys going into girls' bathrooms in Oklahoma. And leadership said, no, anything with Jake Merrick's name on it's not going to be heard. So I went to the committee chairman. I said, why are you not hearing this bill? He said, I don't want to talk about it. And then someone else came out with that bill later. So, yeah, had to throw that in there. Yeah. So it is, what were we talking about? What led to that? Abortion, right? So we just take the hard stand. I ran as an abolitionist. I'd still consider myself an abolitionist that believes that life begins at conception. I didn't even know what an abolitionist was until I ran for Congress, right? And then I was informed that, hey, there's actually a stance called abolition that is stronger than the traditional pro-life stance. And after they told me that it was a hard stance a bit about life begins at conception, you could even go further and specify at fertilization. Life begins at fertilization. I said, well, I guess I'm an abolitionist then. And then I learned about the implications of that. It's like, okay, well, if you believe that life begins at fertilization, then will you vote for laws that say up to a certain point you can end that life? Didn't think about that. So then we take a look at your traditional pro-life legislation. The argument is we can't end it because of Roe versus Wade. So we're going to do as much as we can. It's kind of like with property tax, let's lower it, but we're still going to keep on stealing your money. We're gonna move that to 6 weeks, but you can still kill them up to 6 weeks. So then I started wrestling with this argument, this idea. It's like, well, if life begins there, we should take a stance and say life is protected at fertilization. That's easy to say until you realize that you're going to vote against bills that the general public believes is championing life. So I voted against these pro-life bills. And then on the next mailer, on the next election, says Jake Merrick is not pro-life. When in fact, I'm voting against these bills because I'm all pro-life. So yes, on certain things. So like I said, on property tax, I'd be willing to do that. If they reduced it from wherever it is today down to 2%. Okay, I'll do that. Still, you're stealing people's money. Still, I'm going to push for 0, but I'm going to do that. When it comes to life, I just couldn't make that. I said, it's all or nothing. And I still have that position. Thankfully, Roe versus Wade was overturned. But for me, it was 2 things. It was protecting life. And it was also asserting state power. And as a state, telling the federal government to go pound sand, we don't recognize that court opinion. We don't recognize the court opinion here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma law will be this. We're going to protect life. So we need to take that stance. That's the stance I would take as a governor of Oklahoma, is not just cater and bow down to whatever the federal government says. So which may go back to the discussion about a state convention and those kind of discussions. But, we have to be bold as a state and take that hard stand, especially on the critical issues like life. Any other questions? Yes, I know we're way over time. So literally, I really enjoy this. Like I said, I was doing this for 3.5 hours last night and taking questions. On Tuesday of this week, I'm going to do it again. Tuesday at 6 o'clock on Facebook, 7:30 on X. If you're on X, I'm going to do these online forums like this, and it'll be a weekly thing that I'm going to be doing. And then June 28th, mark your calendar for this. June 28th, I'm going to have a big event. I'm hosting it. My media company, Jam Media, is hosting it. My wife is leading worship with a worship team. It's going to be a big worship and prayer event at the Capitol. June 28th, it's called Oklahoma Rising. 10 a.m. in the morning. 10 a.m. in the morning. So be there. Bring a chair. That's right. Bring a chair. Thank you, guys. I've so enjoyed it today.